Now let's move on to create a brute force password cracking program in Python. So the first thing we need to do is create a new file. And what we will then do is we'll need to import some libraries to make sure this program will work correctly. So the first thing we need to do is import the socket library. This socket library will be used for the connection to the FTP socket, etc. So to do that, we type in import socket, and that will give us the socket library imported into Python. Then we also need to import the RE library, which is for regular expressions. And then we need to import one more module or library, which is basically for the storing of passwords. So it's the import the sys library, and this will be for reading the passwords, storing the passwords, manipulating the passwords, etc. So this is the import sys, which will be the systems library. Before we start creating the actual function, here you see the 3 modules that will be required by our program. So the next thing I want to do is define a function called connection. This will be the connection which sends the IP address, the username, and password. So connection is the function name, and within brackets I put IP, user, pass. Now basically this is the function called connection that will then send the IP address or connect to the IP address with a specific user and password. I've just noticed that password is throwing a small error, and that's because password is a reserved word for Python. So what I'll do is just change pass to PASSW to reflect that it is not a reserved word and a parameter that we can use in our program. Now I want to declare something for the socket. So SOCK equals socket dot socket, and within brackets I want to select a parameter for the IPv4 IP addresses and also for the TCP ports. So for that I need to type in socket dot f underscore inet. So let's go in here and type in socket dot af underscore inet. That will be listed in the list below. So let's look that up and make sure the spelling is correct. Yes, af underscore inet will give us the IPv4 IP addresses, and we also need something for TCP ports. So what we do here is we put a comma and then we type in socket dot, and we want to do a socket stream. So to do that we type in socket, and let's look at the options here that will show us for the TCP ports, and you see it says SOCK underscore stream, which will be for the TCP ports. So here we have a declaration for the TCP ports and for finding IPv4 IP addresses. Let's go on to now print a message to the screen, and what we want to do is print something that says which username, which IP address, which password are we trying. So we want to print something in quotes that says trying, and what we then want to report back is what IP address are we trying, what user are we trying, and what password are we trying. So trying, and then we need to put in some of the variables, which will be plus, and we need something for the IP address. So we put in IP, And let's continue and make sure that we have a colon in quotes, so it shows us that it's trying this particular IP address. And then we want to put in the user, and again the colons in quotes, and then we want to select the password as well with this method. So here we have put the quotes, and now we put in password. So what it's basically saying is what we will print to the screen is what IP address, what user, and what password. Then we also want to do the declaration for sock.connect, and what we want to do here is select the port that we want to connect to. So the IP address, and then we want to put in port 21, which is the FTP port. So I'll write it this way: sock.connect and IP.21. Let me add a few more lines here, one being the data that we receive. So data received will be stored in a data variable, and let's have a maximum length of 1024. I'll just change this s equals to sock.receive. Basically what we're saying here is if a connection is made, data is received. Now what we want to do is send a username and password to the connection to make sure we can try and see if we can log in. So to do that, we type in sock.send, and let's put in something that sends the username first. So let's type in user, and then we want to send the user value. So user, and then I'll put in the variable, which was user. And what we then want to do is also add an extension on this to basically allow for the line to end and then to create a new line. So we do that by the /r/n, so end line and then new line. And then we go on to receiving the data again. So we type in data equals sock.receive, again with a maximum length of 1024. And what we then want to do is send the password. So similar to what we did in the sending the user, we want to do the same, but only thing we want to do is sock.send, change that to pass or password, and change this to password here. And we are still receiving data in the data variable. Now let me quickly review the code. And what we now want to do is basically quit that connection. So we do that by sending, so sock send, and we want to send a command called quit, and then we want to close the connection. So to do that, we go to the next line and type in sock.send, and we'll put in quit, which will then allow us to quit that connection, and then we want to close. So let me just fix the spelling here, lowercase q, and then we want to close this particular connection. Also make sure you have the return. R means end of line and N is new line. I've just fixed up the sock.send and then sock.close to close the connection. Once you have created this little program, we want to return the data. So whatever values have been stored in the data, we want to see that specific data based on what has been sent to the server and what response it's got. Once we've done that, we then want to define some users and passwords. For username, I will just put user and call it test1. So let's do just one user, test1. And for passwords, what we will do is create a list of passwords. So passwords equals, and let's do test1, test2, and test3. So let's create 4 values for the password. So test0 or test, then test1, then test2, separated by commas, and then test3. We have looked at the for loop in a previous lesson. So what we want to do is basically cycle through this username and these 4 passwords. So basically 4 attempts to log into a particular site. So for that, I'll type in for password in passwords and then put a colon here. What we want to do is then look for a connection. So attempt, and we're looking at an attempt to connect. So we type in attempt equals and connect, and here we want to put in the username and password. So user comma password, and I've noticed a couple things I just want to fix up here. So just change this to for password and put in password here. And then what we want to do is notice another spelling mistake here. So I need to fix the attempt with a T on the end here. So fix that. But really what I need to do is actually print this. So let's print and put this in brackets. Now I actually don't need attempt. So let me remove that. And let's have a look at what the names were previously. This should be called, is it connect, or let's go up and have a look at that. It is connection. So let me fix that to connection. And we also want to put in an IP address for the machine we're going to scan. And in this case, because we are scanning in a closed network, that IP address is 192.168.146.52. So basically, we're looking for this IP address and then send that username and password to basically brute force its way to see whether a connection is successful and then return the username and password. I just need to put some quotes around this to make sure the format is correct. And once that's done, I'll just go through the code to make sure that everything looks okay and fix any spelling mistakes or any errors that occurred. So let's go up and have a look at this code. So I just paused the video and made some fixes because I was writing the code as I thought of it. You'll see that there will be 4 attempts. It'll use the user test1 and then cycle through these different passwords: test1, test2, and test3. So basically 4 attempts and against this IP address. So hopefully the program works fine. And as you can see, we will then print the results to the screen to make sure that we are seeing the results, which IP address, which username, which password. So as you can see, it's a simple program basically to determine if a connection can be made via FTP. Once it is established, we're going to send the username and then basically return a new line and then send the password and then receive some data and then finally quit and then close the connection. So it will keep going through the cycle each time until it determines whether a connection is made and what is the username and password that will be successful. So this quick video can basically show you that if you've got 1,000 usernames or 100,000 usernames and you wanted to scan through, you could create a little program like this to basically go and test against an IP address, test all the different users, test all the different passwords, and see whether a connection can be made Firstly, check if the port is open, and then check all the username and passwords. So in this video, we have created a very simple brute force cracking program in Python.